New year, same panel. I'm Charlie Sykes. Sunday Insight starts right now. Happy New Year and welcome to a special edition of Sunday Insight. This week we look ahead to 2016 with our annual year-end preview show. Last year was a tough one for pundits and prognosticators. I mean, who foresaw the rise of Donald Trump or the fall in gas prices? Who could have predicted Scott Walker's rapid rise in the presidential polls or his quick exit from the race? Who would have predicted that Paul Ryan would become Speaker of the House? How many pundits would have predicted that Wisconsin would become a right-to-work state? Or that terrorism would dominate the year's headlines? If anything, 2016 may be even trickier. A wide-open presidential race and major local elections on the ballot. Now, we'll get to the presidential race in a moment, but let's start with the local political scene. In 2016, voters will pick a United States Senator, a state Supreme Court Justice, and locally, the mayor of Milwaukee and Milwaukee County Executive. Former three-term Senator Russ Feingold wants a rematch with the man who unseated him in 2010, Republican Ron Johnson. Supreme Court Justice Rebecca Bradley faces challenges from liberals Joanne Kloppenburg and Joe Donald. And here in Milwaukee, Mayor Tom Barrett, seeking a fourth term, is being challenged by Alderman Bob Donovan and Joe Davis. County Executive Chris Abele will face off against Democrat State Senator Chris Larson. Joining me on our panel this morning, the Milwaukee Community Journal's Mikel Holt, former State Representative Michelle Litjens, political strategist Lynne DeBruin, and media trackers Brian Sikma. All right, we'll start with you, Brian. Looking over some of the local races, do you see any upsets in the making?
I don't see any upsets. Now, I do think the Milwaukee mayor's race of Alderman Bob Donovan is running against Tom Barrett, but the problem is Tom Barrett's not the indispensable man for Milwaukee, but he's kind of an invisible man, and the media just doesn't want to seem to pay attention to this race. I mean, you have high crime, you have terrible roads and infrastructure, you have horrible public schools, yet people still seem to think Tom Barrett's doing an okay job.
One of the big questions was, if there was a strong African-American candidate, this might be the year in which Tom Barrett would face a significant challenge. Is there going to be a strong African-American candidate in that race? Is he vulnerable at all there, Michael?
Well, yeah, he's definitely vulnerable. Joe
Davis.
Joe Davis is a respectable candidate,
Yeah.
but he doesn't have any money. And I think that's crucial. If somebody drops a lot of money. When Willie Hines was thinking about running a few years ago, and he went around asking folks, I said, you need to get 20% of the white vote, all of the black vote like Marvin Pratt did, and you have to have a pot full of money.
Yeah.
Joe Davis can get a lot of the black vote. I don't know if he'll get as much as Marvin Pratt did. But that money is going to be a major factor.
So
now, Lena Taylor jumps in there in the last minute.
But she said that she's not going to run here, and so it would certainly look that Mayor Tom Barrett would be a prohibitive favorite, at least at the moment. And then, by the way, that assumes that Joe Davis gets through the primary. Bob Donovan might get through the primary. Looking at the county election, Chris Abele obviously is faced with a very interesting challenge from his left, Democrat State Senator Chris Larson. How do you think that's going to play out? What kind of a campaign is that going to be?
Well, I think it's going to be a very personal one and a very nasty one, both publicly and privately. I think that as the challenger, Larson might go a little bit more publicly nasty, and Abele might be more publicly, even keel but nasty underneath. Both of those gentlemen fight dirty.
Okay, so it's going to be nasty, it's going to be personal, but what is it about? They're both liberal Democrats.
Partisan politics.
They're both Democrats.
They have some real issues. Chris Larson is angry, particularly over Abele having the authority over the schools. That's why he has a lot of teacher union support, et cetera, but also angry about some of the power being taken from the county board. I don't think that piece will play with the voters, but if Chris Abele, I think one thing, his Achilles heel is if he actually starts selling county land without county board approval, I think the public will take the side of the county board for the first time in many, many years. So
I just don't see any of those as really the cutting edge issues to throw out an incumbent. And Chris Abele is going to have so much money. He's already spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on television.
Yes, and Chris has a lot of money, and Chris Abele has a lot of money. Larson doesn't. It's almost the same situation with Barrett. Barrett's got lots of money.
Okay, State Supreme Court, you have an incumbent, but she's an appointed incumbent, Rebecca Bradley. It's either going to be Joanne Kloppenburg or Joe Donald. Do you see any upsets there?
I don't necessarily. It is going to be interesting watching Donald and Kloppenberg go at it. Really, because they're going to have to move considerably to the left then to win
the primary.
Right, exactly. So, and I think Rebecca Bradley is just such a qualified candidate, and the more that the public gets to see how qualified she is, I think they're not going to upset.
Oh, okay. The wild card in that race is normally an incumbent Supreme Court justice has a tremendous advantage, but this is going to be on the ballot the day of the Wisconsin presidential primary, and so a lot will depend on turnout. Under normal, off-year election type, spring election, I think that she would have no problem. But the question is, who's going to turn out in bigger numbers, Republicans or Democrats, in April? And we really don't know the answer to that. Okay, now let's go back to the U.S. Senate election. I think the polls so far have showed that Russ Feingold, has a lead, sometimes double-digit leads on Ron Johnson. He's considered one of the more vulnerable Republican senators. How do you see that race playing out?
Well, I think Senator Ron Johnson could easily pull this thing off. It's going to take a lot of hard work, but it's not something that's a foregone conclusion at this point, because Russ Feingold is somebody who's very closely affiliated with the Obama administration, worked in the Obama administration, has said he loves the Obama administration's foreign policy, and so this recent kind of, as the year has ended, we've seen a pivot to foreign affairs nationally and in the presidential debate. That could benefit Ron Johnson if he plays it right and if he's willing to go out and work hard and get those votes.
Okay, well, I tend to agree, but that's one of the elections, just like the Supreme Court election is going to depend on the turnout in the April election. Really, isn't Ron Johnson's fate determined by who's at the top of the ticket?
Exactly
I mean, if a Republican wins the presidency and can win in Wisconsin, I think that Ron Johnson has a very good chance of winning. If, though, it is a Democratic year, and let's say that, for example, if Donald Trump was at the top of the ticket, and I think it would be a Democratic landslide, then I don't see how he would survive.
Well, he'll have to differentiate himself from the top of the ticket. I don't think it's impossible. I don't think Wisconsin's not going to go for the Republican nominee, whoever he or she is. But I do think that's possible.
Now, why do you say that? I mean, we've been relatively close. I mean,
we've been relatively close, but I mean, look, since the Bush years, I mean, the Bush campaign thought they could pull it off. We had John McCain, who was a different flavor of Republican, then went back to Mitt Romney, who carried minorities better than John McCain did, but still.
16 is going to be the year of the Democrats. Face it, Ron Johnson is not going to be reelected. He's gone. Feingold's going to get in there. Hillary's going to get in there, and you're going to see this switch. The Republican Party is imploding right before our eyes. They're imploding. There's so much, Trump is ahead because there's so much disenchantment and frustration within the Republican Party.
So I agree with that. We can talk about some of that later. But I think with Ron Johnson, it is so important for everyone to remember that he did what he said he was going to do. The public says they want elected officials to go and work and solve the problems.
Unfortunately, that's not what will determine the election.
Exactly. Ron Johnson did that. But if you're not watching Fox News or reading the Wall Street Journal, you haven't seen him. You don't know who he is in Toma or in Sparta.
I think it's a big problem that no one still knows
being genuine, and that's going to be something he's not going to be able to maintain in the face of his own hypocrisy.
Again, now we have to switch gears to talk about this, because I think his fate is going to be tied up with what happens in the presidential race, which nobody really knows. Still ahead on Sunday Inside. Our predictions for the 2016 presidential race. Wisconsin's presidential primary is in April, which means that the presidential circus will be coming to town, and Wisconsin will matter. The biggest questions: has Hillary Clinton got the Democratic race wrapped up, and will Donald Trump fade, or is he on track to win the nomination? So let's start with you. How do you see the Republican race turning out here? Donald Trump is leading the national polls. Is he going to cruise to the nomination?
I certainly hope not. The Atlantic had a great article out right before Christmas talking about the people that are supporting Trump. Middle-income, white Republicans, for the most part, who don't trust elected Republican officials anymore. If those are the people that continue to be motivated when it comes to next fall or next spring, Trump could walk into this. I think the one thing we have to remind Republicans, we need people who voted for President Obama in 2008 and 2012 to vote Republican in the fall of 2016 in order to win.
We got to get there. And the reality is that Wisconsin's presidential primary has not been, a major center of interest for years now. But I don't think this thing is going to be resolved until April. Do you?
No, I think it's going to be past April before this is resolved. And I do think Michelle has a point there in saying that Republicans, to win 2016, have to get those voters that voted for Obama in the past. But we also have to energize our own base. There's been polling and research done that shows that Mitt Romney didn't energize enough people. people. And I think Mitt Romney was
but that's a general election question. I want to know, is Donald Trump going to fade? Okay, how do you see it playing? Who do you see emerging?
Wins Iowa. I think that probably Donald Trump wins New Hampshire. I think Cruz could pull it off in South Carolina. I think at this point, Marco Rubio, who would be an outstanding nominee, needs to pick a state where he's going to make that stand. He needs to build an infrastructure and just work that state like crazy. Otherwise, I think we'll end up with Cruz as the nominee.
Okay, Hillary Clinton, has she got this thing wrapped up on the Democratic side? Is it going to be a coronation when it comes to Wisconsin?
I don't think it's going to be a coronation, but I do think she's going to get the nomination. And I actually think the big issue on the Democrat side will be who will she pick as her VP. I think it's going to be, in all likelihood, if it's Cruz or Rubio who gets the nomination, it will probably be Julian Castro, who's the Secretary of Housing and Urban Development. But there's also several swing states where there's really good quality Democratic governors or senators, excuse me, who she could pull. So
I don't disagree with anything you just said, but I think that Bernie Sanders is going to do well in Wisconsin, and I think this is going to be an interesting battleground state. So I do think that by the time it gets here, not only are you going to have a lot of interest on the Republican side, but I'm guessing that the Bernie Sanders race won't be over. How do you see that?
Yeah, I don't think it'll be over. I think Bernie Sanders is in it for the long run, but Hillary's going to get the nomination. Let's be honest about that. And Lynn and I were going back and forth over this. I now think it's going to be Cruz, even though among Republicans, I like Rubio better. 2 weeks ago, I said it was going to be Rubio, but Cruz has been making this steady climb of late. I don't see. I think Donald Trump is going to be in it for a while too, beyond April, because he has nothing to lose and he has a pocket full of money.
Here's the problem about predicting, and I'll be upfront about this because I've been wrong consistently on this. I've been predicting that Donald Trump's going to fade, he's going to fade, he's going to fade, and he hasn't faded yet. A couple of things though is that as you get closer to the vote, the polls that are of registered voters or of all adults become less and less significant. When you're talking about Iowa, you're talking about a much smaller electorate. You're talking about the people who turn out in the primaries. Also, Donald Trump is leading because you have an incredibly large and fractured field. That field is going to begin shrinking. It's going to be winnowing. The reality is that even at his top, you still have 60% of the Republican electorate who wants somebody other than Trump. I think the issue of electability is going to become more and more significant. And in part, I guess it may sound like wishful thinking, that the reason I think that Donald Trump will fade is because Donald Trump's nomination is inconceivable. It is impossible that the Republican Party would nominate somebody who is.
What options do they have, though?
So, well, they've never had such a strong field. That's part of the irony about this. Marco Rubio is the most electable of their campaign. Ted Cruz, I think, is the most acceptable to the conservative base, and I think it's going to be interesting to see which of those rises and how much room there is. And I don't see anybody else emerging in this race.
No, I don't. And I think that Michael earlier said that in the previous segment that he thinks the Republican Party is imploding. That's not the case. Now, if Donald Trump is the nominee, the Republican Party will implode for the 2016 election. But the base is frustrated. That's working itself out now among these high-quality
What does that mean that the
candidates.
Republican Party implodes? What does it mean?
Well, if the Republican Party really implodes,
would there be a third party?
No, I don't think it means there to be a third party right now. It means that there be a change at the top in leadership. I mean, Reince Priebus has done an outstanding job as chairman this cycle, making sure that every single candidate gets into
let's
these
go around the
debates.
table. Who's going to be the president of the United States in November 2026?
Ted Cruz.
2016.
Ted Cruz.
Okay. What? All
Hillary
right.
Clinton.
Okay. What?
Michelle told the truth.
She's the president. Who
It's
gets
going to be
elected?
Hillary unless the Republican nomination goes to Rubio. Then it'd be Rubio.
Now, who do you think?
Hillary Clinton.
I actually agree with Michael Holt on this. I think it will be Hillary Clinton unless the Republicans nominate Rubio would win. Now, there's no doubt that politics will dominate the news in 2016, but there will be other headlines coming up as well. We'll go around the panel and get everybody's thoughts on the non-political stories that will make headlines this year. 2016 will be dominated, of course, by politics, and you'll be able to tell that by all the political ads you see on television, but a lot of other things will be happening, too, with the economy, culture, world affairs. So, I'll start with you, Michael Holt. What will be the biggest non-political stories, both nationally and locally, in 2016? Plus, we're going to predict a major surprise later.
Well, it's going to be terrorism, both nationally and then in Milwaukee and urban communities. It's going to be about urban terrorism because people think this is a little blip on the radar where we have these record killings this year. Guess what? In 2016, it's going to stay right up there.
Okay, Michelle Litjens, biggest stories.
Nationally, I think Bo Bergdahl is going to be court-martialed and sentenced to life in prison, and I think Obama is going to pardon him.
Well, that would be
That's
a
a good
huge
That's your surprise.
Okay.
Well, I think security at the Summer Olympics in Rio de Janeiro is going to be a big issue. Brazil has over 10,000 miles of border on 10 different countries, including remote parts of the Amazon jungle, and they have an undertrained police force. So I think that there's going to be a high risk of a terrorist attack there, and that'll become a big issue.
Okay, Brian Sikma.
Well, I think ISIS is going to be continue to be the main story. It's kind of picking off the theme here, but with all these events that are happening this year, ISIS is now kind of looking beyond the borders of where it's at, we're pounding them in Syria and Iraq with airstrikes, but they're looking beyond those borders to attack places like France, looking for these lone wolf terrorists like we saw in San Bernardino. That's going to continue to be a major part of the debate. And I think, here in Milwaukee, the interesting story is going to be to see how long this development continues. I mean, we saw the Bucks Arena, which had some political tones to it. You've got, the Couture downtown. Like, there's a lot going on, even as we look at Milwaukee and realize it's not a great city when you consider the education system, the infrastructure that's out there. I'm not sure how long that can last or even what's really driving it, but it'll be interesting to see how it plays out.
Okay, I agree with all of the stories that everybody mentioned here, but I want to make a prediction for a big story, particularly in the first half of the year. I think you're going to see this snowflake rebellion on American university campuses spread. I think that as big as it was this last fall, you've seen nothing yet, particularly when the weather gets bigger. I think you're going to see protests on campuses all across the nation. You're going to see demands and pressure on universities. You're going to have demands for university presidents and chancellors to resign. That'll be big here in Wisconsin as well. There's a certain amount of momentum, and that momentum will be fed as universities, because this is what they do. They cave in, they give in to the demands, and I think it's going to be a real fight over the future of academia and academic freedom. Yeah.
If you're right about that prediction, then I have to change my presidential prediction, because if we do see that Reformation happening across this country, then a Republican is sure to win.
Well, I do think that it's an interesting point, because I do think that this does have a vibe to me like the late 1960s, early 1970s, where the left is at ramming speed but also overplaying. And it certainly would be possible that you have terrorism, law and order, and the overreach on the university campuses creating a Republican year, unless, of course, the Republicans nominate Donald Trump. Biggest surprise of the year, do you think?
Well, I must say biggest surprise of the year. We saw Chipotle take a huge hit this year with all the E. coli outbreak. I think that the organic food movement that kind of came up with Chipotle is going to become something of the past come 2016.
Okay, Mikel Holt, surprise.
Well, I don't know if it's really going to be a surprise per se, but I think there's going to be a major terrorism attack close to the elections that will determine the election, and it's going to be the top issue after September.
See, I'm going to go the opposite way. I actually think that ISIS and the terrorist network knows what they're doing, and that they are going to kind of sit it out until after the presidential election, because if they go forward too much, they know a Republican's going to win.
Remember Jimmy Carter and Ronald Reagan?
Then, yeah, biggest surprise.
I think it's going to be a surprise that we're not going to see any terrorist attacks until after the
Lynne
election.
DeBruin.
Well, this is a local surprise. I think that UW-Madison coach Greg Gard will actually be appointed permanent coach without doing a national search, even though Barry Alvarez said initially that's what he was going to do.
Well, okay, my biggest surprise is it's going to turn out that the downtown Milwaukee trolley is going to cost a lot more than originally projected.
That's not a surprise.
Except that's not a surprise, but it will be a surprise to all of the people involved, and they will have it. It's totally unexpected. Actually, I think the surprise is going to be there will be a terrorist attack, but it won't be the kind of terrorist attack that we expect. It'll be a cyber attack, and it may be targeting at an American dam or at the U.S. electrical grid, because we always think it's going to be the last war. We think it's going to be the last kind of thing that could be completely different, and we are completely not prepared for that. Next on Sunday Insight, our panel will pick the rising stars of 2016. But first, here's your morning news update. Last year saw the rise of Donald Trump, but also the surprising popularity of self-proclaimed socialist Bernie Sanders and the emergence of candidates like Carly Fiorina, Marco Rubio, and Ted Cruz. But since we're looking ahead, I would like our panel to name the rising star to watch in 2016. Mikel Holt, you're first. Rising
Well, on
star.
the national level, I think it's going to be Paul Ryan, because by mid-year, he is going to start pimp-slapping the Freedom Caucus. Locally, I think it's going to be Russell Stamper for a variety of reasons. He has a secret investigation going on right now that's going to get him a lot of publicity. But I think there's going to be
What's
some
he
kind
investigating?
It has to do with minority businesses in the city of Milwaukee.
Okay.
I said too much already.
Okay.
But also, I think there's going to be a major confrontation between police and this new caucus that's out, kind of like the Black Lives Matter, and Russell Stamper, because of his youth, is one of the few people who can actually talk to some of these younger folks who are leading the new freedom train.
Okay, Michelle Litjens, Rising Star.
I am excited about Congressman Joe Hack out in Nevada because he's taking on Harry Reid, and I think he is going to.
He's running for Senate? No, what's he doing?
Or is he running for Congress?
Yeah, I'm sorry, he's running for Congress.
Right, but he's going to run for that seat eventually.
All right,
and I think
okay.
we're going to start seeing him stepping up to the national stage.
Okay, Lynne DeBruin, Rising Star, 2016.
I'm actually going to name two Democratic women nationally that we don't know that much about here or don't hear much about. One is Rhode Island Governor Gina Raimondo. She's a Democrat who won office after taking on the state unions and winning. And then the other one, people might know more, is Kirsten Hildenbrand, who's also a state senator, and she's
U.S. Senator from
U.S.
New York.
Senator, yes, from New York, because of her work with sexual abuse, both at college campuses and in the military. As far as on the Republican side, I think Paul Ryan's just going to become even more and more powerful because he's shown, even right out of the gate with the budget, that he can get folks together and can get something done.
Well, if you're also right that Julian Castro is going to be the vice presidential nominee, obviously he would be a major rising star as well. Brian Sikma.
Well, I think Senator Ben Sasse of Nebraska, he's a Republican, he's as conservative as they come, but he's got that professorial air from his academic background, that he's able to communicate conservative principles on the floor of the United States Senate, criticizing his colleagues, but in a new tone and a new demeanor. And I think that's going to be an improvement for the Republican Party. It's going to be yet another voice that conservatives can look to help guide them as they shape policy on the national level.
Okay, well, I find myself agreeing once again with Mikel Holt. The rising star is going to be Paul Ryan, keeping in mind that next year will be his first full year as Speaker of the House of Representatives. He's done a little bit of cleanup. The omnibus was kind of a crap sandwich, but he inherited all of that. I also think that because of the disarray at the presidential level, Paul Ryan's role as the intellectual and political leader of the Republican Party becomes more important with each passing month. Thanks for joining us, and remember to join me for my radio show Monday morning. It's on News Radio 620 WTMJ from 8:30 until noon. Have a great week and a very happy New Year.